Welcome to the History of the Batman with Londyn, brought to you by Meltdown Comics and Collectibles in Hollywood, California. This is where we relive the defining moments of one of the most iconic figures in comic art and literature, the Batman. My name is Adam Silverstein from Meltdown Comics, and I am joined by Londyn, and from the shadows, we are also joined by Shadow Adam. Londyn, how are you this week?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. We got a great show planned today. I know this was a big episode that you were looking forward to. Definitely.
It's one of my favorites to talk about on the main blog on Instagram.com/History of the Batman. It's pretty much discussing Batman's humanity in a sense. I think there's a reason why Batman's one of the most popular DC characters is because he doesn't have the superpowers that many of his allies do, and a lot of people relate to that in a sense. And even though, that he doesn't have powers, a lot of the fan base kind of sees him almost in a godlike sense that, he uses all of his science and technology and knowledge to prep every time he has an opponent, and that he wins pretty much most of his battles. And so there's a kind of god complex that's given to this character where with any prep time and with anything, he can win the battle. And that's seen in different comic arts. A lot of people see it from Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns when he battles Superman, or in Mark Waid's Tower of Babel arc where he takes down the entire JLA, and a lot of people use those as a defense, but 76 years is a really long time, and there have been a few or a handful of times where Batman has lost, and it kind of highlights the character that he is, and kind of his flaws show why we like him so much. And so I came up with kind of a top 10 list, and it's called The Myth of the Batman God Complex, pretty much debunking the theory that Batman can beat any being, whether it's super being or anybody. So
now, have you ever talked with people that actually think that he can't be beat? I mean, I think most people understand that he's a man.
No, definitely. I think that's where I was interested into kind of compiling, something like this, because I talked to a lot of people who, no matter what I post, and especially if it's something where he does get defeated or, he doesn't win, that they become really upset. And they're like, no, Batman can beat anybody, especially when it comes to Superman, which I always find fascinating because, like you said, everyone knows he's a man. And I think that's why people enjoy his story so much, because it's an ordinary person doing extraordinary things, yet they think he can beat probably the most powerful being in the DC universe. And it's very interesting to talk to people and to think that, because they're, they are true Batman fans, and I love that. I love the passion that they're so, they love this character so much that they believe that he can't be beaten. But like I said, his flaws, that's something that's really interesting to look at and to see why we like him even more. Right. But yeah, I've definitely talked to people who think that.
Well, I guess one of the things is when you think about it, and not to, ruin anything, but Batman is still here. He's still around. So he is maybe losing a battle, but he seems to win the wars.
Exactly. And even when we go through our top 10, you'll see that, he'll have, have lost at a fight, but in the end, he defeats the enemy. And I think that's what a lot of people use. They're like, oh, well, in the end, he still won. But he had to, get a couple punches and get a couple bruises to kind of get to that point. So I think that's something you can't really ignore when you read a lot of Batman stories.
Right. So bottom line is, at certain times, he gets his butt kicked.
Exactly.
And so you have prepared a top 10 list. Now, is this just through years of reading, or is this how do you figure out that this is the top 10 list? What do you base this on?
It is from years of reading, and it's just going through different stories and looking at different, his rogues gallery and different characters. And I'm sure other people, they're like, oh, well, this person should be number 1 or number 5, and they have their own. And I just thought that this would be kind of a good list to see. It kind of goes over different types of Batman comics, from crossovers to Elseworlds and to regular continuity. And just the list itself is just kind of, it's more, it's not the same character over and over. It's not the same villain. It's not the same type of rogue. And it's just been reading and looking at, the times he did lose, which aren't as many. And I'm sure Batman fans are really excited to hear that. But these, I think, kind of show different aspects of why, Batman has flaws and he has faults, and when he's weak and when he's not. And personally, I think it was a really good list for people maybe who want to get into reading more comics or want to learn more about other villains that aren't really as popular as you always see, like the Riddler or Two-Face. It's kind of a more, just showing different sides of Batman and different stories he's had over the years.
So what is your standard? I mean, how did you judge the top 10? I mean, is this...
I judged it by the importance of the villain who defeats him, first of all, because there are a couple on the list where you don't really see them anymore. You see them in the one comic or the one storyline, and then they kind of disappear. They become kind of obscure, and kind of if the story is as important, if it's just a random Batman comic, or if it's something that leads to a big event, or just kind of ranking it in terms of the importance of the character itself and the importance of the storyline and how it's important to Batman's history just in a general sense. So it took some research, but I think, in general, this is a good top 10 for anyone who's just curious to see when he's lost, even if it may hurt him a little bit.
I hear you. So, for example, I did some research to figure some of this stuff out. So you're not included. So I know there was this Sergeant Brandon that ended up shooting him.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. That's not in the list.
That's not in the list.
Because that was a character that it was just a one-time.
Right.
And that was an officer who shot him, and he kind of disabled him or knocked him
and
out.
There are a lot of times when there's even more just common folks who maybe get a shot in or something, and he's been he falls, or he's been taken out, but then he comes back and beats them. But this particular top 10, each character is unique in a sense, and even though some you only see, like I said, in one story, how they kind of defeated him, I think, is more significant than him just getting, shot by some random person. Or
I got you. So we're talking big whoop asses.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. So also, I'm just curious, you had mentioned a God complex. What is a God complex?
Well, I think... Let's see. I think for anyone to have it, or for people to think of it, it's like they think of the person as kind of a god. And I mean, in just a general sense, someone or something that, has some type of superiority or higher power over others. And, I think a lot of people who are huge Batman fans of their favorite character, they see him kind of in that light, is that he can't be touched, because he's always one step ahead of everyone else. And I think a lot of people, especially when it comes to the Superman versus Batman, and everyone just flatline says, oh no, he can take out Superman, who we know is, who I think can have the God complex, if anyone has that for him, anytime. I mean, you can consider Superman a god, and you can consider other heroes gods or goddesses, depending on their power. But I think it's interesting to see that this kind of applies to someone who doesn't have powers. And I think it's through, it's biased for the people who have it, because they really enjoy it. It's probably their favorite character. Right. And they like to see him that way, that he'll always win. And even if he's in a tough situation or is trapped or is captured, that he'll come out with something. He'll pull out something out of the utility belt. He'll have the Batmobile summoned or anything.
All right, that's Batman. I want to hear about the times now that he gets his butt kicked, okay? I want to hear him pull out the Batarang and it not come back, and then he gets stomped. So why don't you start the list? What is the The number 10. Can we count down?
Yeah, we can count down.
All
That's
right.
fine.
So what's the 10? Number 10.
Number 10 is actually a crossover. It's a DC Dark Horse Comics crossover, and it's from 1991. It's Dave Gibbons' Batman versus Predator, based off the Predator movies. And even just saying the title, if you saw the movie or if you know anything about Predator, it's already how would Batman be Predator? But since at the time the movie was really popular, they did a crossover, and it was contained into 2 stories. And pretty much in Gotham, there were these 2 rival gangs, and their henchmen, were pretty much getting killed one by one. And although they tried to blame one another, they discovered that there's this huge monster going around Gotham named Predator. And so they actually go to Batman for help. And even though Batman doesn't help, the crooks or anything, he doesn't want anyone else to get killed. So he goes up against Predator, who of course is this huge alien and has this, high tech, guns, and has this ability to heal and
camouflage himself.
Yeah,
too.
So exactly. So pretty much he has all of these alien powers and is already just a beast. And he pretty much in the first Batman fights him twice and totally gets destroyed. I mean, it's bones broken and bruising and, cursing. And he's pretty much defeated. And even though in the end of this story, he technically wins because Predator leaves and, he saves Gotham and he stops the killings of the gangs. To get to that point, I mean, he was badly broken. I mean, and definitely lost. And it's okay because, I mean, he's an alien.
Right.
It's not something that's like, oh, why didn't you beat that guy? It's understandable, kind of.
How did he get the alien to leave? Or did he? Or did the alien just leave and they gave the credit to Batman?
Well, yeah. I mean, Batman fought him again, and then he kind of just left. The ending is kind of anticlimactic to me, right. But I think just in a general sense, Batman saved Gotham and stopped, all of the awful murders of them being skinned and killed and everything. But trying to fight for Gotham, he was defeated, which is fine. And I have it as number 10 because even though it's interesting because it's a crossover and it's something that's out of continuity, but it's still interesting because he's going against a being that's completely different from him, not even human. So I thought it was pretty interesting that they did that crossover because the title's Batman versus Predator. So it's a means to like Batman fighting this alien creature, and it's almost giving like, would he win? And to the normal person it should be no, right. Which is understandable.
And I mean, Batman didn't even have time to prepare for it. It wasn't like there were news clippings like a mad alien.
It wasn't, he didn't have the necessary prep time as he usually does to fight him, and he used all of his gadgets and everything he could in his martial arts, but just he couldn't fight the high-tech guns, couldn't fight the invisibility, couldn't fight the healing, abilities that the alien had. I mean, it's just hard to combat pretty much.
I guess it's also kind of cool that DC or, whomever was controlling Batman at that time, whether it be an editor or whatnot, would let him get beat,
Right.
I mean, you're putting a iconic property against another iconic property, and maybe you'd say, look, Batman's got to get his licks in, but exactly. I guess not here.
No, and I mean, like I said, at the end, it's kind of a given. It's almost a given victory. But yeah, before that point, because this was 1991, I mean, Batman pretty much won almost every fight. He probably lost only a handful. I mean, you can count on one hand. But yeah, that's why I thought it was pretty interesting because it's one of the first real fights that, even though people, it's out of continuity, it doesn't count and everything, it's still, he got pretty beaten up, and you really don't see that in most of the Batman comics. So all right. That's number 10.
10, Predator. Number 9. Who's number 9?
Number 9 is the Reaper, and he first comes in Detective Comics 575 from 1987, and it's within the story arc Batman Year 2. It's a follow-up to Miller's Batman Year 1, and it's in 4 issues, and it's by Mike Barr, and Alan Davis does the illustrations. And this character really, it's his first appearance. He hasn't really debuted, but he pretty much is the Grim Reaper, I guess, in the visual concept. I mean, he has the skull face, and he has the cape and the whole, it's kind of like a red and black costume, and he pretty much was a regular person. His name is Judson Caspian, and he suffers the loss of his wife and kind of goes insane. And first he leaves for Europe, and then he comes back to Gotham, and he wants revenge, from the people in the city that, killed his wife. And it's kind of a whole, revenge thing for him. And he starts causing trouble in Gotham, and Batman is hailed by Commissioner Gordon with the bat signal and says, hey, we have this criminal, and we have this guy dressed up like the Grim Reaper. And so Batman has to fight the Reaper.
Wait, did the Reaper use a sickle? Did he use guns?
He pretty much had, he has a sickle, and he has like the robe, and that's what you initially see. So when Batman starts fighting him, he kind of has the upper hand, he fights him, but then that's when he actually has guns. And Batman, of course, he doesn't use guns, and so he's, fighting him as best he can, blocking the bullets. They're in like an alleyway, and he's using trash can lids to block them and everything, and then he eventually falls into the city sewers and kind of floats back to Wayne Manor. And in that fight, he really did get beaten up, and Alfred, at home, I guess he had to repair him and, all of his injuries. And I think why this fight was important was because not only could he not fight against him because he was using guns, and Batman doesn't use guns, was that he questioned his own martial arts, capabilities and talents, because he went up against someone who had a gun and he couldn't beat them. And so in this issue, he has a flashback towards seeing the death of his parents, Thomas and Martha Wayne, by Joe Chill, who uses a gun to kill them. And in this story arc, which in the last episode we talked about Batman, guns, and killing and that history, and on 2 of the covers, Alan Davis shows Batman holding a gun, and it's because in this series, Batman has kept the gun that Joe Chill used to kill Martha and Thomas Wayne, and he has it in his study, and he contemplates whether he should use it or not to get revenge and to, get the Reaper. And he just kind of questions his own morality and his own, talents, and kind of how he, does justice in Gotham, and sees if he needs to change anything. And I think that in itself is a defeat, because he feels that, he trained himself the way he wanted to. He learned all the sciences, all the martial arts and everything. And just with the Reaper going and using a gun and defeating him and, beating him up badly, he questioned his own abilities to save his city. And so I think in itself, that's kind of an interesting defeat. It's physical and it's psychological as well.
Yeah, did Batman get the best of the Reaper at all in the storyline?
Well, the Reaper was actually he fell to his death, and at this point he needed help, and he actually had to have help from Joe Chill himself.
Wait, Batman had to go to Joe Chill?
Yes, it's actually interesting. He had to go to Joe Chill and his men because he needed help to get rid of the Reaper. And so him and Commissioner Gordon, everyone was involved. And Batman was he wanted to kill Joe Chill because he was like, this is the person who murdered my family. And he had to decide whether or not he wanted to step over that boundary that he's placed for himself. But in the end, Joe Chill is killed by Gordon. He's shot in the head because he's going rogue, and so he doesn't have to kill him. And so even though that's gone, the fact that he goes and tries to figure out, okay, what I'm doing isn't good enough for the city and what I made myself to be. So maybe I need to use the alternative and turn to something that I've told myself, I would never do, was to use guns and to kill. So out of the Reaper, even though you don't see him anymore, you only really see him in Batman Year 2, it's interesting to see how much unfolds just from that fight with him. So I placed him as number 9.
All right. Number 8.
Okay, number 8 is also a character that you don't really see much. I mean, after this series, you don't see him in comics pretty much until the New 52, actually. He's Deacon Joseph Blackfire, and he is in the 1988 4-issue story arc Batman the Cult, which was written by Jim Starlin. That is a really good story arc if anyone wants to see kind of Batman out of his element, I think. And like I said, in the late 80s, there were a lot of stories that were kind of dark. There was like A Death in the Family, and then, after Miller's Dark Knight Returns, there were a lot of Batman stories that were limited series, but they kind of went to that dark place, and this is definitely within that genre. Deacon Blackfire, he's pretty much a con man, and he has this cult, which he is pretty much made out of the homeless in Gotham City, and he pretty much uses religious propaganda and brainwashes them to be his army to cleanse Gotham City, which is to get rid of all the innocent. And he has them kind of housed underground in the sewers. And once, chaos kind of starts, Batman begins investigating, using his detective skills to try to figure out who's the leader of, these murders and these raids and all of that. And he is led to the sewers, but he's knocked out by Deacon Blackfire, and he's captured. Now, it's interesting because there have been tons of Golden and Silver Age comics where Batman's been captured before, and he's been placed underwater with sharks, and he's been tied and
to a moving table with
a
saw at the end.
Exactly. I mean, there's so many, and he's done so many escape artist techniques to get himself out of a bind. But this time they captured him, and they drugged him and tortured him, and he pretty much was kept underground. He didn't escape, and he pretty much became one of their minions, one of his people, and brainwashed him completely. And he was gone for weeks, and no one knew where he was. And then once the uprise came and they came from under the sewers, Batman was part of this rebellion, which involved killing and and everything. And it wasn't until the Robin, at this time Jason Todd, came and kind of snapped him out of it. He literally had to kind of help him and kind of get him back to sanity. And once that happened, then him and Jason went up against Deacon Blackfire, and in the end, he got the best of him, and he kind of made his army turn on him, and his army killed Deacon Blackfire. So in the story, you don't see him anymore because, well, he died. But and even though he came back and, was out of, being in that cult, I mean, he really did get defeated. He was drugged, he was tortured, he was captured, and he even was made to kill other people, and he doesn't kill. So in this arc, you see him totally, for someone who is so, strict-minded and has, a philosophy of doing certain things, his particular way, all of that going out the window, is something major, I think, that would be interesting for people who enjoy Batman stories to kind of look at. Jim Starlin really does a fantastic job, and Bernie writes and he does the illustrations and the vivid colors, and just the whole work is a really good a story.
What year was that again?
That was 1988.
I remember that book.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah. I remember it being a big, a book that people needed to get. It was new. Wow, to be number 8 and to have, basically captured Batman, drugged him, and made him do things that obviously go against what he does.
Right.
Wow.
And the only reason why it's so, I guess, low on the list is because you don't really see Deacon Blackfire anymore.
Makes sense.
That's the only reason. If he was more, present maybe in other stories, you really don't see him anymore. I mean, he's like resurrected and like in Infinity Crisis later, but then is dead again. And then New 52, he comes back briefly in, I think, Batman Eternal. I think it's like number 17, and he has his own kind of cult again, and the Joker's daughter's a part of it and everything. But you don't really see him anymore. I mean, after this story, you don't see him for a couple decades.
In the other issues where Blackfire appeared, did he do things this extreme?
Well, I mean, he still kind of had, I mean, especially, I guess, when you see it in Batman Eternal, which I remember reading, he tried to make kind of the same type of army, he's still like a cult leader, pretty much. He still has that aspect about him, and Batman has to go up against him, but once again, you kind of see in the end that his army turns against him. So, yeah, he's still kind of an intense figure. It's very dramatic. I mean, I think any type of cult, anything, is probably, I mean, it's to some extreme.
Right.
So,
well,
yeah.
It seems like to really get on this list, you not only need to best Batman physically, but you need to beat him mentally as well.
Right. It's not just, a gunshot, to the shoulder and he's taken out for a week, It's more than just, the physical. It's what kind of happens after that. It's what Batman, how he responds pretty much to being defeated, or what comes of being defeated, like what happens on the outside of it.
Did Deacon Blackfire actually have ideas to go after Batman, or was he just doing what he was doing and Batman happened to get snared in his trap?
Well, usually, and this is pretty much for any, I guess, villain in Gotham, everyone knows who Batman is in Gotham City. And so knowing that he's pretty much like the savior of Gotham, any villain or any, crime, anything, they go after him as best as they can, or they seek him out, or they plan to try to capture him or stop him because they know he's already on your case and is going to try to defeat you whatever you're doing in his city. Right. So definitely they had an eye on him, and once they captured him, they definitely kept him, and they probably did the best job that probably anyone could do in terms of escaping being captured.
All right, well, number 8, Deacon Blackfire. Who we got at number 7?
Number 7 is Bronze Tiger, and that was in 1979. It was in a Detective Comics 485, and it was a Dennis O'Neil story. And Bronze Tiger, Ben Turner, he is pretty much, this one's interesting because Batman and Bronze Tiger are pretty much equals in terms of their martial arts status. Bronze Tiger is considered one of the best martial artists in the DC universe. So fighting him, you kind of have an equal match. It's not like fighting Predator or, kind of having a lot of things against you. They kind of have the same stats. And Bronze Tiger isn't a villain. He is, one of the good guys, but he's manipulated by Ra's al Ghul he's pretty much one of his men, and he makes him try to kill Batwoman, which at the time was Kathy Kane. And so Batman pretty much is fighting Bronze Tiger to assure that Batwoman doesn't die, because he's pretty much put on like an assassination attempt. And they fight, and it's pretty equal, but it's just with, I guess the panel says, one sudden swift kick to Batman's stomach that Bronze Tiger does, and he's out. I mean, he's on the floor and he's down. It's kind of like a KO, like 1-2 punch, but it was just that kick pretty much laid him out, and another assassin came and killed Batwoman. So in that issue, Batwoman dies.
Well, and that was Batwoman Barbara Gordon?
No, this is
that's Batgirl.
Yeah, that's Batgirl.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. Batwoman was Catherine Kane. She was the first one. There's a Batwoman now, and they're different. But yeah, it's kind of the part of the Kane family. And even though her character wasn't as important at the time, she was kind of one of those characters that she was made in the early Silver Age, kind of, but she wasn't like a superhero, kind of like Batgirl. Her and Batgirl are very different. That woman was created originally for Batman kind of almost as a romantic interest, and she just donned a cape and kind of had a cute outfit and went with them and fought crime, but Barbara Gordon as Batgirl, it's a completely different type of hero. So her dying in this issue actually wasn't as much of a big event, to maybe the editors or the writers at the time, because she wasn't really as much of a significant character anymore. But for Batman, it placed a huge amount of guilt on him because he pretty much lost a Batman family member. And it was because pretty much Bronze Tiger bested him with his martial arts abilities.
Now, I've seen pictures of Bronze Tiger. He's like a man with a tiger face.
Yeah, pretty much.
Is it a mask or is it really a tiger face?
Well, it depends on, I guess, which one. But I think Silver Age, it was pretty much just a tiger face, and they kind of, modernized it, and it's just a mask, or it's just, a man. And then he's kind of like wearing like striped kind of tiger print kind of, but it's more like a martial arts outfit. So it depends on which continuity. But I mean, him and Batman are pretty much equals in, what they do and how they fight. And so the fight in itself, was pretty much, it was reasonable. It was understandable, but he just lost with one kick. And the result of that was the death of someone who was close to him. And that's what I guess makes this so significant, is because he tried to protect one of his, family members, and he lost, and the cost was her life. Now, even though after Crisis on Infinite Earths and the kind of DC reboot in 85, you don't really see Batwoman anymore. Her character wasn't as important, maybe if it was Batman trying to protect Robin and then Robin dies or anything like that. But the fact that for him in the comic, he's like, oh, it's my fault, I'm the reason that she died. It put a lot of guilt on him for losing this one fight. So I think that's why it's important, not because Bronze Tiger comes back and is a villain again, but because of the consequences of him, and kind of his fault at that moment. So that's why I put him as number 7.
Which leads us to number 6. Who do you have at number 6?
Number 6, I have a character that is Prometheus, and he is a Grant Morrison creation. And you only really see him in this arc. For at least Batman and the Justice League and kind of fighting them. And it's in Justice League of America 15. And this is from 1998. And pretty much Prometheus comes and he goes to Watchtower and he defeats each of the Justice League members, with different strategy. But he goes up against Batman, and Batman loses because, and it's kind of unfair in a sense, but the fact that he lost and he had to, he couldn't help the rest of the Justice League is interesting. Prometheus wears this kind of helmet that has the ability to train him in all of the martial arts that not only Batman knows, but all the other ones he doesn't. And so he's, he's not even his equal. He's pretty much, he bests him at his technique. And so it's kind of interesting to compare, Bronze Tiger that we just talked about and Prometheus, because they both have the element of the martial arts, but Prometheus has even more knowledge of it. And then he uses, technology, which includes like guns and things like that. But he defeats Batman. And so it's like the Flash and Green Lantern in the next issue have to go and fight him. And in the end, it's actually Catwoman who defeats Prometheus. And to be as, I guess, frank as possible, she uses her whip and whips him in the balls. And that's how he goes down, which is crazy considering all of the fighting and all of the special techniques he used in the issue before. And then he goes down because, he got kicked in the nuts. So it's kind of almost comical. It's almost like you can't take it seriously anymore after that.
Right.
But the fact that he did beat Batman with, besting him at the one thing he has is how he fights, physical combat is pretty much a defeat, whether or not, how the opponent lost in the end,
I guess it just goes to shows that a man's private parts is definitely the weakest. That's the kryptonite for most. Now, another interesting thing I think about Prometheus is just who he is, right? I mean, isn't he the anti-Batman?
Pretty much. I mean, for him, the law or the police, his family was killed by them. So he wants revenge and justice against, the Gotham, the law, pretty much the police. And he's against, the judicial system.
Right. And that's the total opposite of
exactly.
a
And that's
Batman.
the total opposite of Batman. So not only do they have that kind of reverse thing, but the fact that, they fight, toe-to-toe martial arts. I mean, it kind of is an interesting foil to have against him.
You would think that you would, when you'd be fighting crime like this or going against the Justice League of America, you'd wear a cup. I don't know.
Yeah.
But maybe not. Anyway, so that's number 6. Is there anything else about Prometheus that?
It's an interesting he's an interesting character, and I mean just the fact that his name's Prometheus. I'm a fan of Grant Morrison and his creations, and I kind of expected more from even reading this story. And I mean the first the issue that he fights Batman, the other members, it's good, and like I said, I recommend any of these in the top 10 that we're discussing. I recommend any Bat fan to read.
Does Prometheus ever come back?
Yeah, he does, but it's not really in I guess aligned with the Justice League or Batman, or kind of in conflict with any stories. This is kind of his major story arc that you see him in, I think, for these characters.
All right. Well, number 6, Prometheus. Number 5.
Number 5 is Wonder Woman. And everyone always talks about Batman versus Superman and everything, but no one really asks, about Batman versus Wonder Woman because, I mean, in the Trinity, which is Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman, I mean, she's pretty equal, I think, to Superman and his capabilities. I mean, she's an Amazonian goddess, and she has powers, and she has incredible strength, and that's why even with the idea of the Trinity itself, that Batman stands alongside these two gods, I think that doesn't help people with this kind of god complex given to Batman that he can beat anyone, because he's aligned literally with gods. I mean, he's on the top with the best of the best in the DC universe. And you really don't see them fight, and people even don't see them who maybe want them to have a romantic relationship. They don't even have that. But in a story arc by Gail Simone, it's Wonder Woman, let's see if I can pronounce it, Hikatia. I might be butchering the pronunciation.
Hiketeia.
Right. And it comes out in 2002. That story, they pretty much fight and Batman completely loses both times. But in the general sense, Wonder Woman has to protect this woman named Danielle, and from, I guess, an ancient kind of ritual, and she has to protect her while she's in Gotham City. And of course, for Batman, he is very territorial, and you can see that in any story that you read about him. Gotham City is his city, and even when other heroes come from other cities, he's like, this is my city. I am I do the rules, I do everything. And so Wonder Woman has to come to Gotham to protect her. And Danielle kind of has a bad track record and has some, questionable things that she's done. And so Batman wants to bring her to justice pretty much. He doesn't think that she should be protected, but Wonder Woman doesn't go against her oath. And so she has to fight Batman to ensure that Danielle is safe. And so the first time they go, head to head combat, she pretty much throws him across the street. And I mean, really, Batman is no match for Wonder Woman in terms of fighting. And that was illustrated in this story. And the second time he fought her, he lost, and she pretty much stepped on his head and said, "Don't get up." I mean, she is, if you have to give a God complex to anyone, she would definitely be someone, I think, who would almost deserve it. I mean, she's a goddess. And he admittedly knows this, and he pretty much says, okay, and submits to her beating him. And I put her as number 5 because it's Wonder Woman. I mean, they're allies, they're not enemies. She just, as Batman is, he has certain ways that he treats Gotham City and what he has to do. For Wonder Woman, it's kind of the same thing, for her society and, from her history. She has things that she has to do and promises she has to keep and oaths that she has to live up to assure that what she has to do, is done. And so it pretty much came to that head to head, and Batman was defeated by one of the strongest beings in the universe, which, that's understandable.
Yeah. That's kind of like the reality check. Let me put you in your place type
kind
fight.
of, right. And, like I said, people will be like, no, he can beat her. And, that conversation can go on and on. But, I mean, I think this is the story itself is interesting and the art is fantastic. But, yeah, it's just another one of those stories that kind of in our top 10 that kind of shows that, Batman's human and, he's not perfect, and not saying that Wonder Woman or any other, person in this continuity or universe is perfect, but Batman definitely is more human than the others. And so you definitely see that when he goes up against people as Wonder Woman. So I put her at number 5.
All right. Well, that leads us to number 4. We're getting closer to number 1. I'm excited to hear who the reveal is for that. But who we got at number 4?
Number 4, we have the mutant leader, who is in Frank Miller's Batman, The Dark Knight Returns. And this fight is in issue number 2, and that comes out in 1986. And it's written by Frank Miller. Now, a lot of people, it's funny because they use this story to kind of show how Batman pretty much can defeat anyone, because in the story he fights Superman, which we'll discuss later. But
you just gave me one of the top.
I bet you can figure it out. But this story, it's interesting because, Miller, he puts Batman, into the future, and you see him as retired. He retires after losing Jason Todd, and he comes back as Batman. He puts on the cape and the cowl because this gang is intruding Gotham, and they're led by the mutant leader. They're called the Mutants, and he pretty much wants to prove to himself and prove to even Alfred that even though he's aged and, he's not as, I guess, spry as he used to be, that he can defeat, pretty much these punks, he thinks. And so he goes in and he fights the mutant leader. It's in issue 2. And he pretty much, gets a few hits in, dodges a few, but then he pretty much gets annihilated by him and he almost dies. I mean, the huge guy breaks his arm, breaks his leg, and he really gives him a run for his money, and he almost dies. But then the character Carrie Kelly, who is donning the Robin suit, she comes in and distracts the mutant leader, and Batman's able to go into his tank style Batmobile and goes back to Wayne Manor, and pretty much all of his injuries are fixed by Alfred. But that fight was really brutal and almost killed him, and it pretty much showed that, okay, I'm not the same Batman as I used to be. I can't take the punches as hard as I did maybe when I was younger. And it kind of, gave him some perspective. It kind of answered the questions he had to some of his fears that he can't, win, every fight again, that, he isn't the same man as he was before, he took off the cowl. But in the later issue, he goes and he defeats the mutant leader, and he goes back, and everything. And so this would be one of those like, well, he beat him, but the first fight, he definitely loses to the mutant leader. I mean, he has to have Robin come pretty much and save him because he's so battered and broken during the fight. So I put it as 4 because, The Dark Knight Returns is a very important story, I guess, to Batman's history in terms of transitioning with tone and, just how, the important things that Dark Knight Returns is to his mythos. And definitely it's interesting to look at, it's kind of looking at him in the future and seeing, can he go up against the same bad guys or even ones that are even harsher, and still come out victorious. And it just, it shows his humanity. And I think that's why this one's really important. And especially when it's him coming back from being Batman. He's not always been Batman. He's been retired for years. So it's interesting to look at kind of that aspect and just in general, that Batman is human. So that's why Mutant Leader's at number 4.
All right. Well, now also though, going into that fight with Mutant Leader, wasn't Batman a little overconfident? That
definitely.
I mean, he thought he'd been retired. It's like, this is easy for me.
Right, exactly. He thought it would be the same as he was going when it was his first year out as Batman. But that's why it's kind of like another reality check that, he ages and, he's not the same as he was, a decade ago. So definitely it's something to look at in terms of just how Batman sees himself and kind of, what he considers himself to be. And he kind of realizes that he's not the exact same Batman as he was before, but he still wants to be Batman. So he kind of, changes his, kind of prep almost for the future fights and everything in that series, to complement how he is now.
So that's number 4.
That's number 4.
Number 3.
And number 3 is Superman. And kind of like...
Oh, that guy?
Yeah, that guy, As I know there are Batman fans, and I talk to them every day, and there are a lot that don't like Superman.
Where has that come from? Why are you on... I mean, it's your team Batman or your team Superman? Can you be on both?
I don't see why not, considering...
See, you're so positive.
I am very optimistic.
I agree with it. I mean, I like Batman more than Superman, but I've started to like Superman, respect him a little bit more. I mean, just the iconic nature of the guy you got to respect it.
We live in a split Batman Superman household. Fine.
Oh yeah. Oh, you're pro Superman?
Yes.
Definitely.
Really? And you're anti Batman?
I'm not anti Batman. But I definitely favor Superman compared to Batman.
Right. Well, I agree with that. I mean, I agree with that you can favor one, but I think we were talking about that you don't like him. You're a sophisticated Superman fan.
Right.
What it's that? Why would there be a split?
It's interesting because a few years after they both debuted, I mean, they came out in World's Finest Comics together, and it's with him, Batman, Superman, and Robin. And I mean, they're allies and they're, as close to friends in the early, decades as possible. And I really think a lot of people don't like Superman because I think it's the people who probably don't like this list. The people that, really think that Batman, is the best in the DC universe because not only doesn't have powers, but he defeats people like Superman and like, all of the other, Justice League and, people with powers, all the time. And I don't know. I think some people don't like the fact that Superman is seen as such almost a perfect, like the archetype of a superhero. I mean, he technically was like the first superhero. I mean, he even debuted a year before Batman, and Superman's the reason why. I mean, Superman's the reason why Batman kind of, exists.
Well, it's the reason why all exist.
Exactly.
Really.
I mean, there's tons of, reasons why Superman is probably the most well-known, I think, next to maybe Spider-Man. If you ask people, who's your favorite superhero, what superhero you know, or if you just say, oh, do you know this character? I think Superman and Spider-Man, just in a general sense, are the ones that people would know the most. But yeah, this kind of divide, that some people have, Batman and Superman. I think it kind of was produced after this story arc. When Superman pretty much has to take out Batman, and that's in issue 4 of Frank Miller's Batman: The Dark Knight Returns. And I always, people say, well, Batman beat Superman, but he had a lot of prep time and a lot of help. And let's face it, anytime Superman and Batman kind of go up against each other, except for this case that we're going to discuss next, Superman holds back. I mean, he doesn't want to fight Batman. He never does want to fight Batman. Even in The Dark Knight Returns, he didn't want to fight him. He didn't want to kill him because, with one punch,
he would destroy him. It's not worth it.
Right.
Superman.
Superman. I mean, he doesn't want to kill him ever.
You know what I think? I think it is. I think some Batman fans must take their cues from Batman. I mean, he's very territorial. You've already said that. I mean, maybe that's what it is. We're very territorial. They're very territorial about their love for Batman in the DC universe.
Definitely. I really think the fandom, how much, you like this character and the fact that, he's as human as it can get, but, he's extraordinary. I think people don't like to see that either compared or defeated by a being like Superman, who, in a sense, they're kind of, Superman and Batman are considered day and night. But Superman is at number 3, not only because of this dynamic and how people think of them, the Superman versus Batman, and how everyone's excited for the movie that's coming out and all of that. But if Superman did, want to hurt him or didn't hold back, I mean, Batman would pretty much not exist. And you see that in the storyline Superman Sacrifice. And it's a crossover between Action Comics and Superman. And in part 2, that's in Action Comics 829, and this came out in 2005. It's pretty much Superman is being manipulated, and he's pretty much being brainwashed, thinking that his allies, the people in the Justice League, are his enemies. So when he sees them, they look like someone else, and he sees Darkseid killing Lois Lane. And of course, for him, Lois Lane is the love of his life. And so once he sees that happen, he goes and fights Darkseid. Now, Darkseid, and, he's killed Superman before, and that's like his, toe-to-toe. That's his, enemy, besides Lex Luthor. But hurting someone so close to him, he pretty much just beats him down and literally is Darkseid visually an inch away from death until he yells out, "Clark, stop." And so he stops because the only person that calls him Clark is Batman, is Bruce. And so he realizes that this whole time he's thought he's been fighting Darkseid, he's been fighting Batman. And he's not holding back, and he's been giving all of the full blows and punches that he can give, and puts Batman in the hospital. I mean, Batman almost died. And I think this story kind of, even if Batman fans don't like it, it kind of shows that anytime Superman and Batman have a confrontation in a comic, no matter what the reason is, Superman holds back. I mean, he doesn't want to hurt Batman because even if they're not the friendliest, at the time, he doesn't want to kill him. And in this story, not knowing that it was Batman, he did. I mean, he fought an enemy like he would someone that hurt his family. And he pretty much broke Batman in that story. And after he realized it, he was definitely remorseful and upset and outraged. But just showing that Superman can beat Batman if he really wanted to. That's why I put him at number 3. Because just the whole Superman versus Batman, everyone talks about it every day on any thread, everywhere all over the internet. But when it really comes down to it, if Superman really wanted to, even as a major Batman fan myself, I think he could take him out.
I think you're probably right. So that's number 3, which I'm sure most or many people might argue would be number 1. So I'm very interested to see who number 1 and 2 are. But obviously, before we get to number 1, who is number 2?
Number 2, I put as Bane. The villain Bane, and he is my favorite, even though everyone in the room is laughing at me right now because he's my favorite. But Bane is my favorite Batman villain, and he was the first villain that
So
I
real
really
quick.
Yes.
Bane is your favorite.
Yes.
And so next week you're actually going to do a show just on Bane.
Yes, I am
So it'll
doing
be
a spotlight
a
just on
love
Bane.
fest of Bane in here.
Yes.
All right. Sorry to cut you off, but I just wanted to give a little promo of what we got coming. Because Mason, the engineer and producer here, is giving you dirty looks the whole time.
He is making fun of me.
Actually, I'll admit, the first fight where he actually broke his back.
Oh, yeah.
That's legit.
Right.
But I don't know if it beats Superman. But I'll give you this. Bane is a mere mortal as well.
Right.
So maybe if that's where you're going.
All right. Well, we're gonna have to convert Mason next episode.
Definitely.
All right, but so let's go. Since you kind of gave a little clue there, Mason, about why Bane is so badass, then let's hear a little bit, Londyn, about why you put Bane at number 2. Besides him being your favorite.
Besides him being my favorite, definitely. I'm trying to be as non-biased as possible.
Objective. Right?
But Bane is known as the man who broke the bat, because before this arc, pretty much no one really came close. In regular continuity, just on a regular day, in a regular storyline, Batman was taken out by a rogue, and this was in the story Batman Nightfall, which was a huge crossover event in the early 90s, 93, 94, and it had 3 parts, Nightfall, Night Quest, and Night's End, and the main villain is Bane, who was made particularly by Chuck Dixon for this story. He debuted in a one-shot a few months before this arc came out. I know, because they like Bane too. They know that he's awesome. But Bane systematically broke Batman mentally and physically, and you see this in issue of Batman 497 from July of 1993. Just in general, Nightfall, Batman releases all of the inmates in Arkham Asylum, and Batman has to go one by one and pretty much put them back. And this pretty much tires him, exhausts him, and he is mentally stressed and physically stressed, just trying to get everyone back into Arkham. And Bane discovers who Batman is. He knows that he's Bruce Wayne. He knows that he lives in Wayne Manor. He knows that he's Batman. And besides Ra's al Ghul, kind of in Batman's history, a villain who knows who Batman is, they're the only two. And so that in itself is something that is kind of an important thing to think about in terms of him being one of Batman's rogues. And in this issue, he comes into Wayne Manor, and Batman and Bane fight. He pumps himself up with the steroid venom that makes him even just a super strong man. He was already a strong man, but it gave him pretty much an unbreakable, supercharge. And he beats Batman pretty much to a pulp all over Wayne Manor, going into the Batcave and knocking over, the T-Rex and the Giant Penny and all of the, icons that, interesting enough, show, they're Batman's trophies, they're Batman's victories, and Bane just kind of pushes them over like it's nothing. It's kind of illustrating, that he's literally taking down and tearing down all that he's built up because he wants to be the ruler of Gotham, and he does that pretty, amazingly.
Kind of metaphorically destroying him too.
Exactly. Destroying what he's built over the years and what he's accomplished. And then at the end, he literally puts him over his knee and breaks his spine, paralyzing him for a period of time. And he can't be Batman for about a year's length in comic books. And
that particular picture, I think, is probably one of the most iconic pictures in the Batman comic book mythos. I think you maybe when he's carrying Robin
Right.
and when he's getting his back broken by
Those
Bane.
are the two panels definitely that Batman fans recognize, definitely. So I mean, just the fact that it was the first time Batman ever really was taken out of being Batman because a rogue beat him, that already is important. And just the fact that he broke Batman down, in such a careful way, planning it that, I mean, other villains have tried this for years before, many years before, since the 40s, trying to do it. And then Bane comes in, and he's not just huge, he's brains and brawn. And I think you kind of see him as not just, he's kind of frightening. I mean, looking at him in the comics and seeing him, he gives you that kind of fear factor. And he does what no one prior to this did, and took Batman out. And then he had John Paul Valley as Batman, and then he came back. But for a period of time, Batman wasn't Batman. And that single panel where he says, "I'll break you," I mean, that kind of shows Batman's humanity probably better visually than anything prior to that. So that's why I put Bane at number 2.
I can't imagine that there's a number 1. I mean, that is that to me. If I'm thinking of Batman, and like we just said, the iconic pictures or moments in his career, I mean, I think of that back being broken. I mean, just right over Bane's knee. I mean, what an image. So I guess there's only one other image I can think of in terms of probably a villain or someone who could beat Batman, but I'm not sure if I'm right. So who's number 1? Can we get a drum roll? Is there something we can get a drum roll?
Number 1 is the Joker. Is that surprising?
No.
No?
That was
Okay.
the image. I think the Killing Joke
Yeah.
face is probably, which is so powerful. It's not even Batman, it's Batman's not in that image.
Right.
It's that face of the Joker.
Definitely.
So obviously we've had, I think it was episode 2,
right,
where we just talked about 75 years of the Joker.
Yeah.
So tell a little bit about the times that he's defeated the Batman.
Well, definitely Joker has defeated him on a more personal level than other rogues, because he's, like you said, in Batman's The Killing Joke, and in Alan Moore's story, he shoots Barbara Gordon and who's Batgirl, and he's even killed Robin, Jason Todd, and then Batman Death in the Family. And just in that way, really broke down Batman in terms of just not only putting major guilt on him, but, seeing that he failed to protect his family, kind of in the same way when he lost to Bronze Tiger and Batwoman was killed. But these are definitely, it's already hard on Batman because Joker is his arch nemesis. He is his enemy. He's the one that he always goes head to head with and always has a hard time, I think, trying to almost figure out what to do with him or how to defeat him, because every time Joker escapes or he's put in Arkham or anytime Joker leaves the story, Batman has to go and think how many people he's murdered, how many people he's injured, what pretty much came from the Joker bringing chaos to his city and letting him go, and not when he has him by, the shoulders or when he has him by the neck to just end it, to just stop it. But his, in the stories, he doesn't want to kill. He doesn't want to do that to anyone. And so he won't go against his moral code to stop such a madman that has caused grief to himself and to all the innocent people in Gotham that he's come across. And I think even though, for a year he was put out of being Batman when Bane broke his back, it's been so many decades where Joker has, emotionally and psychologically beat him when he's escaped or when he is locked up again or when he has killed someone and Batman wasn't able to stop it. I think each, moment that happens is just a cut deeper into Batman's consciousness, knowing that he failed in some way. And I think no matter all of the physical, times, physical when he's been broken and everything that we've gone through in the top 10, where people have beat him in hand-to-hand combat, or when he's been up against a firearm, or anything that he's been up against, it's never going to equal the traumatic toll mentally, physically, psychologically, emotionally, all of that Joker has placed on him over the past 75 years. So that's why I put Joker as the number one in our list of the myth of the Batman God complex.
Well, I think you made a pretty good case. What do you think, Shadow Adam?
I think she's made a good case. If you look at Joker, I think it's not one cut, but it's like she said, little cuts over the years into a deeper cut. She's demonstrated that he's broken Batman mentally, and that can be just as damaging as the physical breaks that she's demonstrated with the other characters. And sometimes, the killings, especially of the family members, that can be hurt worse than the getting yourself hurt, I think.
Yeah. And I think the fact that obviously he keeps coming back, and it's more diabolical than the last time.
Right. And there's no end in sight to him.
Well, there is an end in sight, but Batman won't do it.
Right.
Exactly. That's the problem.
Or that's the good thing about Batman.
Right.
We haven't figured that.
Right. That's what people like about him. But then again, if you think about it, it might be. But yeah, that's my top 10.
Well, that's a great list. I can't wait to see what the debate would be. What if the listeners agree with that, if they've got any other input that they wanted to, or maybe there's a fight we missed. I doubt it, knowing the research that you do. But if the listeners and the audience want to get involved and send you their top 10, or tell you what you missed or what they thought you could add, how can they get in touch with you, Londyn?
I think the best way is if they send me an email at historyofthebatman@gmail.com, or if you are on Instagram.com/historyofthebatman, just shoot me a direct message, and I definitely take all messages, anything you guys have into consideration. I read everything. So please, if you can, email me at historyofthebatman@gmail.com.
And we also want to open it up to the listeners that they can reach out to talk about or discuss or ask about new topics that they might want to hear about, and things that they want to comment on. We want to include them as well. I mean, part of the reason that you do this, Londyn, is, you've told me a number of times, is it just giving back to the Batman and the comic book community.
Definitely. I think everyone who enjoys Batman stories, just being able to kind of be in a community, just to be able to enjoy it and talk about it, and just, it's nice to have other people that enjoy the same things you do. And that's pretty much what I like to do with History of the Batman, is able to make a place where people can go and maybe learn something new, or maybe discover a story they hadn't heard before, or something about Batman that makes them love him even more.
All right. Is there anything going on in the Batman world that people need to know about?
Really, it's just, the other things that we mentioned before. Everyone's awaiting the Batman Arkham Knight, which comes out June 23rd. People are still, keeping their eyes peeled for anything Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice or Suicide Squad, for the films. There's animated movies being released. I think Batman Animal Instinct, the animated DC film, was just released, and I actually got to watch it at WonderCon.
WonderCon, yeah.
And it was really good. It was a really good film, and you actually get to see Red Robin and Nightwing and Batman all fight together, and the Flash and Green Arrow, which everyone loves all those characters, especially if you're a fan of the show Arrow and the Flash. So it's definitely a Batman Animal Instinct. That's a really good animated film.
It's
if you
not
want to check
quite
it out.
as dark as some of the
No,
other.
it's very light.
So
it can be. It's good for kids. Yeah. So if you have kids who are fans of Batman, that's definitely a movie I would recommend.
And even though it's a little far off, the Bruno Heller said that for season 2 of Gotham that they're going to introduce Victor Fries
Yep,
aka Mr.
Mr. Freeze.
And there's going to be some more Joker development in the
Right.
series as well.
So that'll be something to see how they'll, if the Joker, is who everyone thinks it is from that one episode, or if it's gonna be an entirely different person. But just knowing that there are more kind of costume rogues than just the kind of crime families that you've seen in the first season, it's kind of developing the Gotham City that everyone reads about in the comics. So it'll be interesting to see how all of that develops over time.
And we talked briefly about next week's episode, which will focus on Bane. Other than being your favorite, why Bane? Why are we talking about Bane? I mean, aside, I guess we also talked about that he broke Batman's back, so he's pretty important for that. One of the most iconic images in the Batman history. But what else do you find fascinating about Bane that the listeners will enjoy?
I think it's kind of fascinating the history after Nightfall, after, he breaks his back and then, later he's defeated, but the kind of story arcs that kind of come in after where he kind of is involved with Batman. He actually helps Batman, and the kind of family history that he explores and how it relates to different rogues in the Batman gallery, and just him as a general character in the DC universe, and how he kind of is, in a way, not a sympathetic character because he broke Batman's back, but in other ways, he's going through a lot of kind of human things that other villains we may not care about or, even know. But his history beyond, being the man who broke the bat is interesting as well. So I kind of wanted to explore that in our next episode.
Well, I am looking forward to it. I think we've covered today the Batman's, the myth of the God complex. So thank you, Londyn, as always, for sharing your insight and your research. Again, I marvel at your ability to recall and retain the information. It's awesome. And I really,
thank you.
On behalf of Meltdown, obviously want to thank you for being a part of the family here and sharing your information with your fans and ours, and hoping that obviously we're all considered one big community. So thank you.
No, thank you guys for having me on. It's really great to add more to what I can do on the blog, and hopefully can get more people excited, about Batman.
There you go. All right, everybody, you've been listening to the History of the Batman with Londyn, brought to you by Meltdown Comics and Collectibles in Hollywood. This show has been produced and engineered by Mason Booker. If you want to reach out to Meltdown, you can hit us at Twitter at Meltdown Comics, or you can obviously check the website, www.meltcomics.com. You'll find a place on the site where you can listen to all of Londyn's History of the Batman podcast. And again, thanks for tuning in. See you later. See you next week.
Hi, guys.